All right. So you guys may have heard there's a lot of stuff happening along Eastern Europe right now. And who better to bring on to talk about what's happening in that side of the world than somebody who lives there? Our friend of the show, of course, George Samueli. He really needs um, no real introduction because if anyone follows our show or any of my previous work, you're familiar with George being one of my most favorite Georges in the world. George Samueli is, of course, an author of, I'm going to put this book on screen for you here. George, let me pop that up there. Of Bombs for Peace, NATO's Humanitarian War on Yugoslavia. I couldn't have named it any better myself, George. And George not only is an author, but he's a writer of other stuff. You could follow his work, senior fellow at the Global Policy Institute over in London. And George, I believe you have a podcast of your own.
That's right, Manila. It's The Gaggle. And you can follow it on YouTube. You can follow it on Locals, thegaggle.locals.com. So everybody, please subscribe. Ideally, you'll contribute some money towards it, but you don't have to. You can subscribe, and you get an enormous amount of content for free. But it'd be very nice if you chipped in a little bit of cash as well.
Yeah, and help George.
Yeah, exactly. Help
and the Gaggle.
Exactly. Help independent, free, thoughtful journalism.
Absolutely. Who's on the Gaggle with you, George?
It's Peter Lavelle, whom I think you know. He was a former colleague of yours. So
that's right.
Yeah, yes.
That's right. I wasn't sure if you rotated because you bring in guests, and I know Peter was on
We bring in guests, but no, yeah, we normally we do a kind of a dialogue with the two of us, and then sometimes I do a solo. But yeah, he's my partner.
Great. And as you can see, producer Robby is there filling in for Ted, who we speculate could be bird watching or perhaps on the Elon Musk rocket somewhere at this point. Or no, I'm sorry, Jeff Bezos rocket, because Bezos is taking, just random people into space. Why not? So a couple of things that we're watching, George, and I'd love to pick your brain about. The first one, obviously the big news, I would say, is this alleged peace brokering offer coming from this guy, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the forever president of Turkey, NATO member, obviously. Why this guy? Why Istanbul on Thursday? And do you believe that Putin and Zelensky will show up? And Trump said he's flirting with the idea, if he's done with his Middle East trip in time, that he may just swing by Istanbul.
Well, you have to consider what has been going on in the past few weeks. Trump, when he took the oath of office, promised that he would bring this war in Ukraine to a speedy conclusion, and he has tried a variety of initiatives, with not great success. However, it was enough to induce a panic among NATO's European members, and they've been basically going out of their way to try to sabotage any possible peaceful outcome. They're absolutely wedded to continuing with this war, continuing everything that they've been doing since February 2022. So what they've done is come up with this, what they think is a cute idea of offering an unconditional 30-day ceasefire that Zelensky said, yeah, we'll accept it. And then they said, well, now the ball is in Putin's court. Putin doesn't accept the 30-day ceasefire. That will prove to Trump that Putin is the one who is standing in the way of peace. And that will get Trump on board, and he will continue with the Biden, NATO, EU policy of, unrestricted arms flows into Ukraine, funding, and everything else. So they met in Kyiv on Saturday. This is the coalition of the willing, and issued their ultimatum. If Russia doesn't agree to this 30-day ceasefire, it will be the sort of the mother of all sanctions that we're going to impose. And they continue to repeat throughout Saturday. And Donald Trump is on board with us. Trump supports us. Trump did not support it. Trump notably was not present in this meeting. He didn't call in to this meeting. He didn't even send some minion
Right.
to this meeting. There was no one there representing Trump. But the coalition of the willing continued to repeat, "Oh, Trump's with us. Trump's with us." But what happened then is, after they issued this ultimatum, is that Putin said, "Well, we're obviously not going to just accept a ceasefire, because a ceasefire during which time these arms will continue to flow into Ukraine, and trainers and all kinds
Right.
of weaponry, artillery, and everything else is going to continue flowing for 30 days, so that the Ukraine will have a nice 30-day breather and then restart the
Right.
fighting then. So we're not going to accept that. However, we are prepared to start direct negotiations." And he named Istanbul because, of course, Istanbul was where the talks, the aborted talks, took place
Hmm.
in 2022, when it seemed like Russia and Ukraine were close to an agreement. As Putin likes to say, the Ukrainian side had initialed the agreement. They were close to an agreement until, of course, Boris Johnson flew into Ukraine and told Zelensky, "Well, why do it? Don't agree to this." And so Putin said, "Well, we will resume those negotiations in the venue where we were negotiating."
Is it
And,
symbolic then, you
and
think?
sorry.
Is it symbolic, you think?
Well, I think he wanted to make it that this was a continuation of the talks. And Putin said, "Look, we wanted to continue with these negotiations. It was you, Zelensky, who walked away. You walked away when Johnson told you, well, forget it." So we want to resume. We've been ready to resume for 3 years now. Um, so he made this offer of direct negotiations. And what then happened, and that was the crucial moment, because the Europeans dismissed this. Well, the direct negotiation means nothing. We want that 30-day ceasefire. And then Trump came out with his truth, saying, "Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Let's have direct negotiations." And then Zelensky had to respond to that and said, "Yeah, okay, I'm ready for direct negotiations." So this is the Macron and the rest of them said, dismissed this offer of direct negotiation, not interested. But then Putin said, Trump said, "Yeah, this sounds like a great idea, direct negotiations." They had to respond to Trump and said, "Yeah, I'm going to show up." And then, of course, he said, "Well, if Putin doesn't show up, then that'll show that he's not very serious." But of course, Putin had never offered to
Right.
negotiate directly, one-on-one, between him, and that was never on the cards in Istanbul. It wasn't one-on-one negotiations in Istanbul, so they had their own negotiating teams. The offer of a one-on-one meeting was part of the package in Istanbul, which was that the crucial decisions about the future of Donetsk, Lugansk, and Crimea would be decided in a one-on-one meeting between Putin and Zelensky. So what's
Sure.
likely to happen is a long way of answering your question. What's likely to happen on Thursday is that Zelensky is going to show up. Russians are going to show up, but I don't think Putin's going to show up. And I think because Putin never said he was going to show up, but the Russians will show up, which means that because Putin's not going to show up, I doubt very much that Trump's going to show up. I mean, it was always unlikely Trump was going to show up. He's in the Middle East now, so that would be a considerable detour for him to then to go to Istanbul. But so I think that's what will happen. I think Zelensky will be there, and I think some Russian negotiators will be there, but no Putin, no Trump.
Maybe Lavrov?
That's possible. I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. But not necessarily, because that wasn't really part of what Putin offered. Putin did not offer any particularly high level delegation. He just said we will
Mm,
begin direct negotiations in
fair
Istanbul,
point.
and then we'll see how the talks go. And then if the talks progress, then of course you can start bringing in a higher level delegation. So
Fair
you know,
point. I read it.
Lavrov, I wouldn't count on Lavrov showing up.
I read it as Vladimir Putin saying, "Hey, I'm going to show up. Are you going to show up?" And now Zelensky saying, "Well, I'm going to be there. Are you going to be there?"
Right.
It's
Yeah. No, yeah, Putin never said I will be there. I think
fair point.
Zelensky did that because I think Zelensky knew Putin wouldn't show up, and so this would be a real
Mm,
PR stunt for him. That he's going to go to Istanbul and says, hey, where's Putin? I'm here. I'm ready to talk. You wanted to talk. I'm here, but instead you send a kind of a low level delegation. So but
fair
that was
point.
really never part of the original Putin offer that he himself would show up.
So I have a quick question for you, Mr. George. What what is Europe's interest in prolonging the war? I don't understand. What do they get out of it?
It's a very good question, and it's not an easy question to answer. I mean, it's the way to think about it is that they are really completely wedded to this policy. It's almost like it's become an existential matter for them that they've thrown everything they have into this war, and they've now, if this were to end, then really they would essentially have to admit failure, and they haven't really accomplished anything. And more seriously, there will be serious investigations into the origins of this war, and in particular, why was that deal in Istanbul aborted? Because it was a very good deal for Ukraine, a deal that really, Ukraine didn't deserve, but nonetheless, the Russians made a very generous offer, and it wasn't even very good for the Russians. So why did the Europeans and the Biden administration, and in particular Boris Johnson, why did they urge Ukraine on a suicidal course, saying no to that very good deal, and then fighting on for 3 years, and this extraordinary loss of human life? That's going to come up once this comes to an end. That's going to be very much up for debate, and that's going to really call into question the judgment and integrity of the NATO governments and the NATO leaders.
Gotcha. Because I mean, to me, I'm very much in the Mark Sloboda school of this. I don't think there is a political solution. I think it'll be settled on the battlefield. What do you think? I mean, do you see any instance at all where Russia would concede to any of the European or the American demands? Like, for example, no, they don't control all the 4 oblasts that they have annexed. The Ukrainian government is still intact. Do you see any situation where Russia will settle for anything less than what their stated goals are for the sake of peace, or do you think they're just going to just keep on going and just end this on the battlefield?
Yeah, I think they probably will continue. I mean, I think that the minimum that the Russians would want to accomplish would be the complete control of the 4 oblasts, which they don't have as yet. So, I mean, most Lugansk about 99% under Russian control. Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Donetsk about 70% under Russian control. I think at a minimum they will want those 3 oblasts fully under their control. Ideally, yes, there'll be demilitarization of Ukraine, and no foreign troops in Ukraine, but that may be more difficult to achieve. I think if the Russians secure all of these oblasts, and that's probably, you're right. I mean, that would have to be done by military means. They haven't done it yet, but they will have to use their military force to get that done, because I don't think the Ukrainians are going to withdraw. I don't think Trump is going to demand that they withdraw from the oblast. So Russia will have to accomplish that. But once they've accomplished that, I think that would be the moment when there would be some kind of an agreement. I don't think the Russians will continue, for some regime change in Kyiv and the rest, because I think that would be very difficult to do, and that might. And that so this is another issue that could be risky. I mean, it would antagonize the Trump administration, and then the Trump administration might get very heavily involved in this, and then any hope of any subsequent improvement of relations between Russia and the United States would just simply be down the tubes. So I think the Russians still want good relations with the United States. So I think they will have to, use additional arms just to secure the minimum, and that is the control of the four oblasts.
Okay. Now, George, let's go back to Turkey for a second here before we switch gears and go into the Romanian elections. What is in it for Turkey? Turkey is a NATO member. President Erdogan, we've seen go back and forth between his support for Vladimir Putin in one way or another, but then sending military equipment to Ukraine. And, he does politics. He plays politics very well. Whatever we think of him doesn't matter. He does what's best for Erdogan. And maybe, I don't know if that's what's best for Turkey, but what's in it for them? Why do they want to continue to try to at least give the illusion of brokering peace? Is there anything good for Turkey that would come out of this?
Not really. I think this is just simply a means for Erdogan to posture on the world stage. He becomes a peacemaker, a peace broker. But I think in this case, really, the choice of Istanbul is that's where the initial agreement was very close to signing. So therefore, well, why not continue in the venue where we almost came to an agreement? And then therefore the Russians could say, well, look, we never gave up. We never said that negotiations should stop. So it makes sense to be in Istanbul. But they could quite easily be taking place somewhere else. So, but it's convenient for both. But I can easily see it could happen in Riyadh. But Riyadh isn't particularly geographically proximate. I mean, it's quite a long trip. So I think it makes sense. And Turkey is, it's very good at playing both sides of the street. So Turkey has maintained good relations, even though it's a member of NATO. It's maintained good relations with Russia. It's maintained pretty good relations with Ukraine. So it's not. It does make some sense that Turkey could act as, in some ways, a mediator, but it's not. But Turkey isn't really being a mediator. These are direct negotiations, so it's without really any mediation.
So just kind of a hosting a venue.
I think it's a hosting because it's actually not mistrusted by either side.
If Russia is successful, with their minimum, war aims that we talked about just a minute ago, does that put does that jeopardize the existence of the NATO alliance? I mean, if they are defeated in Ukraine, does that then bring up questions about, is NATO still viable?
I think NATO will survive because if Russia does indeed succeed militarily, then it'll be a limited success because it will only have taken a limited amount of Ukrainian territory. Remember, I mean, Trump has said that this I think is a quite a likely deal, because Trump has said, look, if they take these oblasts, at least they didn't take the whole of Ukraine. So they will have taken this, they will have, whatever it is, 20% of Ukraine. And then how will NATO interpret this? Well, NATO will interpret it as, we have a big threat on our eastern frontier. We need to mobilize. We need to spend more money on our military. We need to organize ourselves. We have to really come together and integrate our military commands and to face off this Russian threat. So any Russian success will actually be a shot in the arm for NATO. It becomes a further justification for its existence, for extra expenditures. Trump has already demanded, they jack up their spending for up to 5% of GDP. So this, well, yeah, we need to, because there's a threat from Russia. Russia might attack the Baltic states. Russia might attack, Sweden. I mean, these scare stories will serve to rationalize NATO's existence for another 20 so years. NATO's existence is only under threat when there is no justification for its existence. When there's where's the enemy? So there's no enemy. That's always the moment of gravest danger for NATO. That's why at the end of the Cold War, that was the moment of the gravest danger for NATO. No one could think of a reason why NATO should continue to exist.
Yeah, exactly. I think more and more the younger generation questions this, and that also proves to be a threat for the existence of the group anyways. So let's switch gears now. The Romanian elections, I can't even keep track anymore, George, how many do-overs they're going to be forced to have. The runoff has proven successful for the guy, George Simeon, who is, I guess, Romanian-style Trump, I guess we can say. That's maybe not in the interest or working in the favor of the other European Union members who were not happy with the previous winner. Can you break down for the people who are not following what's happening in Romania, why there are so many elections and runoffs in the past 1 year over and over and over? Why is this happening?
Right, exactly. Well, there was this, those guy, Călin Georgescu, who was on the brink of victory last December. He won the first round of the presidential election, and the Romanian political establishment, and of course NATO and the EU, got very anxious because he was a Romania first type politician, or like an Orban, and was very critical of the Ukraine policy, and generally very critical of NATO. So the Constitutional Court of Romania stepped in and essentially annulled the election, citing irregularities in the TikTok campaign for him. By saying, well, Russia was involved in this TikTok campaign. Now, of course, in the first place, they couldn't really come up with any evidence that Russia was involved. In the second place, even if Russia was involved in this TikTok campaign, Romanians went out and voted for Georgescu. So even if there was this TikTok campaign, what difference does it make? I mean, people actually went out and voted for him. So just as the second round of the voting was taking place in December, the Constitutional Court then said, okay, well, we have to cancel it because of Russia. Now, the problem was that, there was subsequent investigations. They couldn't find any evidence of Russian involvement. And this TikTok campaign was actually organized by a political rival of the conservatives. They were hoping to boost the support for Georgescu in order to split the vote on the right, standard operating procedure, split the vote, and then the Romanian liberal would get in. Had nothing to do with Russia. But they had to decide, okay, we'll have a runoff, or not a runoff, a rerun of the election in May, which is where we are now. And then, of course, Georgescu said, okay, fine, well, I'm going to put my name in the ballot. And of course, as soon as it was clear that he was going to run in May, he surged in the polls, and there was no question that he was going to win. So the Romanian authorities arrested him, came up with some nonsensical allegations. He's involved in money laundering, supporting fascists. Apparently he had said nice things about the Romanian dictator from the 1930s, Antonescu, and Antonescu, this is something, it was around 80 years ago. So, but, so they brought this up and said, oh, we can't have somebody who says nice things about Antonescu. So he said, no, you can't run. And then, of course, then that's when this George Simeon's moment came. Simeon had run in December, but he didn't do particularly well. He only came in fourth. So then he surged once he declared that he was the new Georgescu. He would be he'd be a kind of a carbon copy of Georgescu. He'd be kind of also Romania first. My hero is Donald Trump. I'm going to be Trumpian. I'm going to stick with Trump. Whatever. And at every moment, I'm going to be just like Trump. Even though he said that his hero in Europe is Giorgia Meloni, who's an extremely pragmatic politician, who's ran as a conservative, but an anti-immigration, but she sticks with Ursula von der Leyen. Now, the problem with Simeon and where there's a difference between him and Georgescu is that Georgescu was a kind of a sovereignist, a kind of a national sovereignty. He said Romania should basically be run by Romanians and shouldn't be a cat's paw of NATO and pursue NATO policies that are contrary to Romanian interests, like in Ukraine. And Romania has a border with Ukraine, a very large border with Ukraine, and Romania acts as a transshipment hub for weaponry into Ukraine, and that's what Georgescu objected to. Simeon's a little different. Simeon is an ethno-nationalist. He had cut his political teeth basically attacking the national minorities in Romania. The most prominent of these national minorities is, of course, the Hungarian minorities. There are many, many Hungarians in Romania. And Simeon had objected to having these ethnic nationalist political parties in Romania. The Hungarians have their own political party. He's against the whole Hungarian language and culture and so on. And so the Hungarians in particular absolutely hate Simeon. They said that this is our enemy. He's an enemy of the Hungarian people. So this kind of creates a bit of a tension, because if Romania under Simeon is going to pursue this goal, the Georgescu goal of national sovereignty, he would obviously align with Viktor Orban in Hungary. But Orban can't really be very happy about Simeon's very fraught relations with the Hungarian minority in Romania. So when he won the first round of the vote with a 41%, Orban said nothing. Normally Orban is very voluble. He said, yeah, blow for Brussels, I'm all for it, and fantastic. He said nothing. And then, Simeon, try to make a pitch for the Hungarians by saying, I'm going to be a Viktor Orban. I love Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban is a model for the kind of government I'm going to have. I want national sovereignty. I want independent, sovereign, and Europe of sovereign nation states, and a Christian Europe. And all the kinds of things that Orban says. And then so Orban said, yeah, I like the sound of this Simeon. So yeah, I can work with him. So when he said that, the Hungarians of Romania immediately got very upset. They said, no, you can't support Simeon. He's our enemy. He's the worst thing for the Hungarians. And now Orban has sort of backed away from that. It says, well, I defer to the political party that represents the Hungarians of Romania. Whatever they want, whatever they think is best, I will support that. But
okay.
Again, long story short, even if Simeon wins, it's not clear that he will win. But if he does win, I think it's going to be difficult for him to form an alliance with Orban. It's that issue of the Hungarians is a real sticking point between Hungary and Romania.
So I'm going to ask you the dumbest question you probably have heard all week. Why don't you just change the borders? I mean, if there's such an ethnic problem, and I realize it's very simplistic. I'm a typical dumb American. So I imagine this happened after World War I, with the collapse of the Austrian Empire. I mean, if you have different ethnic groups, And if they don't particularly like each other, that why are they not able, for whatever reason, to exercise their sovereignty, if we even believe in that anymore, and change the borders? I mean, wouldn't that solve a lot of these problems in Europe and in Asia and these other countries? I mean, to me, that makes sense, but I'm a dumb hick from Montana. What do I know?
Well, you're right. I mean, that wouldn't make sense. Hungary was very hard done by after World War One at the Treaty of Trianon, and they lost huge amount of territory. They lost Transylvania, the sort of very beautiful part of Hungary. That went to Romania. Then they lost a large part of the north that went to Slovakia. At the time, it was Czechoslovakia. In the 1930s, Hitler offered the Hungarians kind of a redrawing of the borders, and Hungary did achieve a redrawing of the border. They got a piece of the Slovakia, and then they got a piece of Romania back. And you know, that redrawing of the borders actually was more in conformity with where the ethnic groups lay. But then after 1945, all the borders were restored. The status quo ante was restored. Status quo ante for 1940 was restored. I think the Hungarians would certainly like a redrawing of the borders. They would like to get back some of Transylvania. Romania, which is about twice the size of Hungary, of course, strongly objects. And so all that happens is just this very difficult relations. There are times when, because of politics, the Hungarians can overlook the issue of the treatment of the ethnic Hungarians. In the case of Slovakia, Robert Fico was also not exactly a friend of the Hungarians of Slovakia, but Orban has overlooked it because there is a kind of an alliance between Fico and Orban against Brussels. So they have good relations, even though the issue of the ethnic Hungarians, is a sore point. Maybe something like that will happen in the case of Simeon, but at the moment, that's a very difficult one, because Simeon, was explicit. That's how he launched his political career, as an enemy of the Hungarians of Romania.
Gotcha. Thank you for answering that. That's just one of the things. I've always just wondered, if you have all these different ethnic groups living in different countries, they cause political problems, nationalism, have all these other things. That seems like if you just let them go, it seems like that would solve those problems. But maybe it's just too simplistic for international politics.
You're absolutely right. But the problem is that the powerful forces in the EU and NATO refuse to allow this. I mean, Yugoslavia is a case in point, where once Yugoslavia broke up, then it made sense to redraw the borders, because they say, look, this used to be a common state. These were arbitrary administrative boundaries that were drawn up, and therefore ethnic groups were kept separate. It didn't matter when they were living in the common state, but now that they're separate state, and these administrative borders became international frontiers, then it would make sense to redraw borders. But the moment anyone raises them, NATO immediately starts threatening the use of force, and in particular the Serbs who were the most hard done by through these arbitrary administrative boundaries becoming international frontiers. So you had the Serbs being stuck in this Bosnia and Herzegovina, where they really wanted to be a part of Serbia, and then of course you had the Serbs in Croatia also wanted to be a part of Serbia, but they were told, shut up and stay where you are, because if you start making any trouble, then you're going to have to deal with NATO bombs. Now, in the case of Ukraine, Russia has taken matters into its own hand, and said, these were arbitrary borders drawn up by the Bolsheviks. They never had any relations to where ethnic groups actually lived. This is what the Bolsheviks did. They drew up these borders and kept everyone at everyone's throat because they were so arbitrary. But once they became international frontiers, then they were then subject to persecution, then something had to be done. So Russia has done this, and they're strong enough to be able to do it without NATO doing anything, NATO being able to do anything about it. The Serbs, unfortunately, weren't strong enough to do it, and so they had to accept the reality on the ground because ultimately the Serbs couldn't defeat NATO.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's pretty good whenever a defensive alliance attacks you and then claims self-defense while it does it. So
that's exactly
pretty wild.
It's a defensive, exactly.
One more election, George, and then we'll quit bending your ear. The Albanians also had an election. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're looking at on screen here. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama secured a fourth term in office after his party dominated Sunday's parliamentary elections with 94% of the ballots counted. Rama's Socialist Party won 52%, while opposition leader Sali Berisha's Democratic Party sits on just 34%. It's obviously marking a setback for this MAGA message.
Sali Berisha is, he was a terrible person. He was an extreme nationalist, Albanian nationalist. You can be an Albanian nationalist, but he kind of created problems in Kosovo, particularly during the 1990s when he was essentially whipping up irresponsibly a kind of Albanian nationalist fervor in Kosovo. So Sali Berisha has this, it's a long track record of essentially irresponsible nationalism. So generally the socialists in Albania are a little more responsible than these extreme nationalists. But they ultimately they have to do as they're told. I mean, they follow the NATO script, and so while if you go back in time, the Albanian socialists were willing to cooperate with Belgrade in just sort of trying to calm things down and work something out in Kosovo in particular. But it was Sali Berisha who was absolutely determined to cause as much trouble as possible. So anytime he loses out, I think it's good news for Europe.
Excellent. I don't know the inner workings I'm not super familiar with Albania, so I was curious to see how this would play out in terms of the world stage, how the EU might respond to it, how NATO might respond to it. So in this case, they're happier with the Socialist Party.
I think so. I mean, I don't think right now it's a real problem for him. I mean, it would be possible if Sali Berisha had won, then things would be a little more difficult in Kosovo. I mean, things are generally quite tense between the rabid nationalist Kosovo Albanian leaders in Kosovo, and essentially they try to make life as difficult for the Serbs in Kosovo as possible. With Sali Berisha in Albania, I think that would probably fuel further this kind of Kosovo-Albanian agitation against the Serbs. So I think probably the Europeans just, in order to have fewer headaches, are probably quite happy with this result.
Yeah, old bad blood, as they say, George. It doesn't go away quickly. There's George's book, Bombs for Peace, and go check out his podcast called The Gaggle with our buddy Peter Lavelle.
thegaggle.locals.com.
There you go, because, Peter Lavelle never says anything very spicy, George. Not at all. George Samueli, always an honor and a pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, it's very good to speak to you.
Please go check out George's work and check out his book online, Bombs for Peace. Unless you've got a new one that I don't know about, George.
I don't have a new one yet, so
Not yet.
That's to check out. Yeah.
Yeah, so go check out that one, Bombs for Peace, NATO's humanitarian war on Yugoslavia. It's like George is like an expert on this subject or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so much, George.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.